Welcome to the road to 1 million US dollars. Let's get right into the Bitcoin chart for today, starting on this 1 day time frame for Bitcoin, because currently we are still in this uptrend. And yes, as you can see in this line right here, so long as we keep holding above this previous all-time high, I am still long-term bullish on Bitcoin, even with this little bit of a slowdown here over the weekend. This is also exactly what we expected over the last couple of days. So what I'm going to do in this video is zoom in a little bit to the shorter time frames for Bitcoin, what we can kind of expect over the rest of the weekend here. And then I also want to answer a question that I saw in yesterday's comments. So let's just dive right into the short term for Bitcoin right away. And I want to start off with this bearish divergence here that we saw in the charts, which is when you have higher highs in the Bitcoin price and lower highs in the RSI momentum indicator. Typically, it points towards a break from all of this bullish price action that we have been seeing here recently. And yes, in the beginning, we saw a bit of a pullback on this lower time frame, albeit a very small pullback to the downside. But as I said, when this actually confirmed, sometimes you get a situation where you keep making higher highs for Bitcoin and you basically just have to redraw your trend line over and over again until eventually you do actually get that choppy sideways price action, or perhaps even a little bit of bearish momentum. But by that time, if you have been shorting this entire time with high leverage, then potentially your stop loss has already been hit multiple times as we were still moving to the upside here. So this is specifically something I warned about, and that is actually how it played out here over the last couple of days as well. And right here, we do have a new confirmed bearish divergence. And yes, so far we have seen it play out as well with some choppy sideways price action over the weekend. One thing that is slightly different with this bearish divergence that actually just confirmed is that right now we are actually technically breaking this short-term uptrend that we are in, pointing towards potentially actually a bit of a move to the downside to come grab some liquidity to the downside as well. Although, again, be careful if you are trying to short a move to the downside like this, because you don't know when this is going to turn around and absolutely take you out of your short position there. Because if you look at every other time frame, this is all still extremely bullish. The 1 day time frame is very bullish. The 1 week time frame, very bullish. I would not be surprised if we actually do see a bit of a move to actually come grab some liquidity to the downside at some point. But at the same time, I am still long-term bullish and expecting this price to continue to move higher here. One thing that actually leads me to believe this is this CME gap that we have for Bitcoin sitting at about 77.2K for the Bitcoin price. And currently, as I'm recording this video, we are trading at about 76.3K. And in the case that you are not familiar with CME gaps, typically over 90% of CME gaps tend to get filled. And therefore, it would not be surprising if we now actually get another move to the upside to actually come fill that CME gap. Now, just to give you an example here, we also had a CME gap about 2 weekends ago where we first got a big move to the upside. I believe this was about a 10% move to the upside here, before we then came back down to actually fill the CME gap. So do keep in mind that something like that is possible. We can see a bit of a pullback potentially and then still come back up to fill the CME gap. But yeah, my analysis here remains the same. I am still long-term bullish, even if we now get a bit of a pullback, which in my personal opinion is not even guaranteed at this point, considering how strong the bullish momentum has been. And besides that, also with these massive ETF inflows that I will show you a little bit later on in this video as well, this is also having an upwards pressuring effect on the Bitcoin price. So that is also something that we should keep in mind. Now, if I take a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map over the last 1 week, right here, you can see that we have some liquidity to the upside and to the downside, which again, similar to what I said yesterday, is quite typical for a Bitcoin weekend, where because we are chopping sideways, we get a lot of people shorting and a lot of people longing, leading to these big pockets of liquidity here. The big pocket of liquidity to the upside is sitting at about 77.3K for the Bitcoin price. And notice how this also aligns with the CME gap that I was talking about, further leading me to believe that it is likely that we are going to take out that CME gap at some point. But there is also some liquidity to the downside, For example, there's a small pocket of liquidity at about 76.1K, and the first big pocket of liquidity to the downside is sitting at around 75K. There's another big pocket of liquidity to the downside at 74.2K. So for now, on this lower time frame, there really isn't any momentum in the market. We are literally just chopping sideways here. But if you now actually start to see some bearish momentum on the lower time frames, then it wouldn't be surprising to actually come down to take out that liquidity at about 75K. Next, I actually want to answer a question that I saw in yesterday's comments from Kay, who said, isn't there a lot more liquidity to the downside than to the upside? I don't understand why that doesn't seem to come up much more in my videos, I'm assuming. So let me show you what he or she is probably talking about. So if I zoom out all the way to this 1 year time frame, recently we have seen some massive pockets of liquidity to the upside from bears just shorting Bitcoin over and over again in a clear uptrend. So obviously those positions have now been taken out on this recent massive bump to the upside. But before that, we also had big yellow pockets to the downside on this higher time frame here. And what I'm assuming Kay is asking is like, hey, why aren't we talking about these big pockets of liquidity? Because if typically the Bitcoin price gets attracted to where there is the most liquidity on this chart, then shouldn't we be looking towards much lower price action for Bitcoin to come grab that liquidity there? Well, besides the fact that recently, at least, most of the liquidity was actually to the upside, hence we actually went to the upside to come grab that liquidity. At the same time, the reason I'm mostly talking about liquidity to the upside, recently at least, is because we were just in this uptrend the entire time. The way I see it, trading is all about probabilities. And if we are in an uptrend, it is simply more likely that we are going to take out those big levels of liquidity to the upside first before we come down to grab liquidity to the downside in a higher time frame move to the downside like this. So to really drive the point home, let's say that we get some kind of top and we actually start reversing from there, then you will start to hear me talking a lot about levels of liquidity to the downside on those higher timeframes as well. Hopefully that explains it. So next, moving on to the Bitcoin ETF flow tables for today, looking at this inflow from last Friday here, we got about a $300 million inflow into the Bitcoin ETFs. So this trend of getting hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin being bought every single weekday is continuing. And yeah, as I said earlier in the video, so long as that keeps happening, then this will have an upwards pressuring effect on the Bitcoin price. Now, currently it is a weekend, so on Saturday and Sunday, there will be no new inflows or outflows from the Bitcoin ETFs. But of course, next week, I will analyze this once again. And I just think it is important to keep an eye on this every single day in case we get some kind of change in behavior from the Bitcoin ETFs. Because as good as this has been recently with this massive push towards the upside, if the Bitcoin ETFs flip very bearish, selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin every single day, then this will have a downwards pressuring effect on the Bitcoin price. And I want to be able to take that into account in my analysis. So that is why I look at this every single day, of course. So if you want to stay up to date with the crypto markets, then make sure to subscribe to my channel with notifications on so you don't miss any of these important update videos. Either way, this has been today's market update. Don't forget to join the Road to 1 Million community on Discord. You can do so with the link in the video description. But regardless, if you do end up joining or not, thank you for watching once again, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one.